Pachycephalosaurus is the last, largest, and most famous member of the pachycephalosaurs, or thick-headed, bone-headed dinosaurs. In the 70s, paleontologist Peter Galton proposed that male pachycephalosaurs used their dome heads as battering rams like bighorn sheep. In the Jurassic Park franchise, Pachycephalosaurus can be found alongside two closely related genus, Stygimoloch and Dracorex. However, it is now believed that these two genera represent juvenile stages of Pachycephalosaurus at different points in their growth. As a result, Stygimoloch and Dracorex are considered obsolete. The practical effect of the Pachycephalosaurus seen in The Lost World. Jurassic Park was sculpted and painted by Scott Stoddard and was mechanized by Jeff Edwards and Rich Haugen. There were 3 versions that created and employed for use in the film. These 3 variants were a full-sized hydraulic puppet, an insert head, and an animatronic of the Pachy in a ramming stance for when it headbutts one of the vehicles of the InGen hunters. 9 Pachycephalosaurus were bred by InGen on Isla Sorna, where they were raised by workers. They were not originally intended for Jurassic Park on Isla Nublar. After Hurricane Clarissa forced InGen to evacuate, these dinosaurs were released and adapted to Isla Sorna's ecosystem by consuming lysine-rich plants. During the 1997 Isla Sorna incident, InGen's hunting team captured a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus on the game trail, nicknaming it Friar Tuck after Roland Tembo struggled to pronounce its genus name. The dinosaur briefly escaped, attacking a hunter and crushing another's legs against a car door before being subdued again. It was later freed by Sarah Harding and Nick Van Owen, though its fate remains unknown. It was confirmed by Jack Ewens during a live stream that the Pachycephalosaurus seen on the security camera in Jurassic World was an adult specimen, and that the smaller specimen seen in the Lost World was a juvenile. As mentioned, Pachycephalosaurus was once thought to have 2 close relatives, Stygimoloch and Dracorex, but studies suggest they are actually juvenile forms of Pachycephalosaurus at different growth stages. Horner and Goodwin found that as these dinosaurs aged, they lost their spikes and developed domed skulls. Later studies supported this, showing that similar trends occurred in other Pachycephalosaurs. Fossil discoveries in 2016 reinforced this idea, as baby Pachycephalosaurus skulls shared traits with all 3 supposed genera. However, some researchers argue that Stygimoloch might be distinct due to slight stratigraphic differences. Pachycephalosaurus is famous for its thick skull, leading to theories that it engaged in headbutting like bighorn sheep. However, some studies question this, suggesting the skull was not suited for high-impact collisions. Instead, it may have used flank butting where it struck rivals on the sides. In 2012, research found skull injuries consistent with combat, supporting the idea that Pachycephalosaurus fought each other. Further analysis in 2013 revealed bone infections from repeated trauma, strengthening the case for head or flank butting. Histological studies also confirmed that their skull bones could rapidly heal from injuries. While the exact diet of Pachycephalosaurus is unknown, its small, serrated teeth suggest it ate leaves, seeds, and fruits, though some scientists speculate it may have occasionally eaten meat. Deinonychus was the basis for novel canon's velociraptors, and in turn the raptors seen in the films. Jurassic Park novel author Michael Crichton visited John Ostrom, the discoverer of Deinonychus, when doing research for the novel. Ostrom said that Crichton's velociraptor was based on Deinonychus in almost every detail, and Crichton had even called him to inform him that he had renamed the Deinonychus in his novel to Velociraptor because he felt it sounded more dramatic. During the production of the Jurassic Park film, Steven Spielberg's production contacted John Ostrom and requested copies of all the technical papers that Ostrom had done of Deinonychus. Unlike the novel, the raptors that were seen in the film were to be properly named Deinonychus, and Mark McCreary had even made concept art of this raptor in 1991, but later in pre-production it was renamed to Velociraptor. The skeleton of Deinonychus were first to show the now infamous sickle-shaped retractable foot claw used for ripping open the skin of a victim, causing the prey's guts be ripped and with a considerable amount of damage. Deinonychus also had a nasty bite with over 60 knife-like teeth. Although with a deadly bite, its arms and legs would be most powerful and could rear on one leg and kick an opponent. Ostrom's description of Deinonychus in 1969 has been described as the most important single discovery of dinosaur paleontology in the mid-20th century. The discovery of this clearly active, agile predator did much to change the scientific conception of dinosaurs and opened the door to speculation that some dinosaurs may have been warm-blooded. This development has been termed the dinosaur renaissance. Several years later, Ostrom noted similarities between the forefeet of Deinonychus and that of birds, an observation which led him to revive the hypothesis that birds are descended from dinosaurs. 40 years later, this idea is almost universally accepted because of its extremely bird-like anatomy and close relationship to other dromaeosaurids. Paleontologists hypothesize that Deinonychus was probably covered in feathers. Clear, fossil evidence of modern avian-style feathers exists for several related dromaeosaurids, including Velociraptor and Microraptor, though no direct evidence is yet known for Deinonychus itself. When conducting studies of such areas as the range of motion in the forelimbs, paleontologists like Phil Center have taken the likely presence of wing feathers into consideration. Sauropelta was one of the earliest known nodosaurids. It was a heavily built, quadrupedal herbivore measuring about 5 meters long and weighing 1.5 tons. Its skull was triangular and flat, with a broad rear and a tapering snout. The skull roof was extremely thick and fused, lacking visible sutures. It had leaf-shaped teeth suited for cutting plant material and likely possessed a keratinous beak at the front of its jaws. Its long tail made up nearly half its body length, with ossified tendons stiffening it. Like other nodosaurids, it was covered in armor. Rows of domed scuts protected its neck, while small bony nodules and larger scuts covered its back and tail. A sacral shield formed over its hips for added protection. Its most striking feature was large, pointed spines along its neck and shoulders, which decreased in size down its body. Flat, triangular plates lined its tail, also decreasing in size toward the tip. The arrangement of these spines and plates limited neck and tail mobility, providing additional defense against predators. Sauropelta lived in wide floodplains around rivers that drained into the shallow inland sea to the north and east, carrying sediment eroded from the low mountains to the west. Periodic flooding of these rivers covered the surrounding plains with new muddy sediments, creating the Cloverleaf Formation and burying the remains of many animals, some of which would be fossilized. At the end of Cloverleaf times, the shallow sea would expand to cover the entire region and would eventually split North America completely in half, forming the Western Interior Seaway. Abundant fossil remains of coniferous trees suggest that these plains were covered in forests. Grasses would not evolve until later in the Cretaceous, so Sauropelta and other early Cretaceous dinosaurian herbivores browsed from a variety of conifers and cycads. Nodosaurids like Sauropelta had narrow snouts, an adaptation seen today in animals that are selective browsers as opposed to the wide muzzles of grazers. Pteranodon was successfully recreated by InGen in their lab on Isla Sorna, where they were fed and parented in captivity, being raised in the Isla Sorna aviary. When Hurricane Clarissa struck Isla Sorna, the InGen personnel fled the island. Some of the Pteranodons were freed by the evacuating workers, but a population of Pteranodon was still kept inside the Isla Sorna aviary. The pterosaur was the largest flying animal known on Isla Sorna. By 2001, there were 4 adult pteranodons and 6 juveniles living in the Isla Sorna aviary. At some point, the family encountered a human as evident by the human remains in the nest in Jurassic Park 3. It is unknown who this person was, and if they were even alive when the pteranodons found them. Pteranodon was chosen over Pterodactylus for the Jurassic Park films due to its larger size and popularity. Steven Spielberg initially scrapped the aviary scene from the first movie due to budget concerns, but later attempted to include pteranodons in The Lost World. Jurassic Park, though these ideas were ultimately abandoned, Jurassic Park 3 featured pteranodons more prominently, with their sounds created from a mix of animal recordings and voice acting. Some alternate scripts included pteranodons attacking a rescue chopper or traveling to the mainland to hunt humans. A full-size pteranodon suit was made for Jurassic Park 3, but was never used. Eric Kirby was attacked and abducted by a pteranodon in the Isla Sorna aviary, taken to a nesting area where baby pterosaurs attempted to feed on him. Billy Brennan heroically used a paraglider to rescue Eric, but as they escaped, adult pteranodons attacked, forcing Eric to jump into the water for safety. Meanwhile, Dr. Alan Grant and the other survivors faced their own battle against a pteranodon in the aviary, eventually escaping as the creatures fled Isla Sorna, later being tracked down by InGen security. Pteranodon was recreated by InGen a second time for Masrani Global Corporation's new Dinosaur Park Jurassic World. Despite their aggression, they seem to be comfortable with living alongside the smaller Dimorphodon inside the aviary. After escaping, the pteranodons displayed aggressive behavior towards humans when they reached Main Street. They would seize individuals, attempting to carry them through the air, but often drop them if they were too heavy. Pteranodon had a wing shape similar to modern albatrosses, allowing it to soar efficiently over long distances. While it primarily relied on soaring, studies indicate it was capable of substantial flapping flight. It likely took off using a quadrupedal leap, and evidence suggests it could launch from both land and water. Trackways confirm that Pteranodon was quadrupedal on land, despite early theories suggesting it could not walk. Its diet mainly consisted of fish, which it may have caught while swimming rather than flying. The large crest on its skull was likely used for sexual display, as its size varied significantly between males and females. Some theories suggested it functioned as a counterbalance, rudder, or heat exchanger, but these were later dismissed. Males had larger crests and were bigger than females, indicating sexual dimorphism. The species likely had a polygynous mating system, with dominant males attracting multiple females. This suggests males did not participate in raising offspring, similar to modern pinnipeds. The Gallimimus stampede scene in Jurassic Park was conceived early by Steven Spielberg as an adaptation of a similar event in the novel. It replaced a hadrosaur herd with Gallimimus because they could run at higher speeds, a proposal put forward by Phil Tippett that eventually became final. When designing the Gallimimus, conceptual artist Mark McCreary used the modern emu as his main reference to create a bird-like appearance. Spielberg wanted the dinosaurs to look colorful and dynamic, leading to several proposed color schemes. Paul Mejia sculpted the maquette based on Creary's concept art, which was then used by ILM for both the adult and juvenile models. Early CGI tests by ILM featuring a Gallimimus herd running through a still photograph of Hawaii impressed Spielberg with their smooth movement and authenticity. Further tests showing a fully rendered Tyrannosaurus chasing the Gallimimus confirmed that CGI was the right choice over go-motion techniques. This final decision paved the way for the groundbreaking visual effects scene in Jurassic Park. Between 1986 and 1992, InGen successfully cloned 44 Gallimimus on Isla Sorna, where they were raised in holding paddocks. Some were later transported to Isla Nublar, where their paddock was located in the southern region of the park. However, their exact location varied in different tour maps. the Gallimimus paddock was not seen by the endorsement team during their initial tour of Jurassic Park. When Dennis Nedry disabled the park's electric fences, the Gallimimus, like other dinosaurs, were able to roam freely. Unlike some species, they initially remained close to their paddock. The next morning, Dr. Alan Grant and the Murphy children witnessed a Gallimimus herd fleeing from a Tyrannosaurus rex. One individual tripped and was caught by the Tyrannosaurus, which killed and ate it. The remains of this Gallimimus were left in the same spot for over a decade. By 1994, the Gallimimus population on Isla Nublar had decreased to 9 due to frequent Tyrannosaurus attacks. After Hurricane Clarissa struck Isla Sorna, InGen personnel abandoned the island, leaving the dinosaurs to survive on their own. Among the freed species were 20 remaining Gallimimus, which expanded their range across the island. They primarily inhabited the southeastern region of Isla Sorna. There, they coexisted with other herbivores and became one of the dominant species in the region's ecosystem. Gallimimus had a flexible neck, weak arms, and was highly adapted for running, reaching speeds of 50 kilometers per hour. Its sideways-facing eyes limited binocular vision, but improved awareness of predators, and its skeleton was highly pneumatized, possibly aiding in locomotion or thermoregulation. The beak contained ridges similar to those of ducks or turtles, suggesting a diet that could include filter feeding, herbivory, or omnivory, but gastrolith evidence supports a primarily plant-based diet. Growth studies indicate changes in skull shape, increasing snout length with age, and the presence of wing-like structures in adults, likely used for courtship or display. Unlike its real-life counterpart, the Tsintaosaurus in the Jurassic World franchise has a very upright posture when standing on 2 feet. In reality, it would have walked primarily on 4 legs, but when running on 2, it would remain a horizontal posture. Tsintaosaurus spinorinus is a hadrosaurid dinosaur discovered in 1950 in Liang, Shandong, China. Described in 1958 by Chinese paleontologist Yang Zhongjian, its name derives from Qingdao and its distinctive nasal crest. The holotype includes a partial skeleton with a skull, while additional remains were found in the same area. Some were initially assigned to Taenia species, but later research suggested they belonged to Tsintaosaurus. Originally, the dinosaur was reconstructed with a unicorn-like crest, a hollow, forked structure extending from the snout. In 1990, Weishampel and Horner questioned its existence, proposing the crest was a distorted nasal bone and that Tsintaosaurus was synonymous with Taenius. However, in 1993, Bufftot and colleagues confirmed the crest's authenticity. In 2013, Prieto Marquez and Wagner revised its reconstruction, suggesting the crest was larger and started from the tip of the snout, with a structure resembling that of other Lambeosaurines. Their study also reinterpreted the dinosaur's air passages, rejecting Yang's theory that the tubular nasal structure served as the primary airway. Instead, they suggested a standard Lambeosaurine airflow system, where air entered through the souterrains and traveled through paired passages into a chamber within the crest. The tubular structure likely reduced the crest's weight rather than serving a respiratory function. Apart from the crest, Tsintaosaurus had several distinctive traits. It had a thick, rounded upper beak and ridged premaxilla. Its nasal bones formed a bony block in front of the brain case, and the skull exhibited unique frontal bone extensions and deep grooves on the prefrontal. The supratemporal fenestra was wider than long. Tsintaosaurus, a medium-sized hadrosaur, represents an important part of China's late Cretaceous dinosaur fauna. Its unique crest has made it a subject of debate and revision, highlighting the complexities of hadrosaur anatomy and evolution. Metriacanthosaurus was a medium-sized theropod with a femur length of 80 centimeters. Gregory Paul, in 1988, estimated its weight at 1 ton. Thomas Holtz gave a length of 8 meters. Metriacanthosaurus was named for the height of its neural spines, which are actually not overly tall for theropods. The holotype was discovered in 1871 by Parker at Jordan's Cliff in Weymouth, and the specimen includes an incomplete hip, a leg bone, and part of a backbone. The geologist John Phillips briefly commented on the specimen during the same year. These bones were from the Oxford Clay Formation, which dates to the Upper Jurassic. Originally named as a species of Megalosaurus in Megalosauridae, Metriacanthosaurus has since been reclassified in Metriacanthosauridae. It is thought to be related to genera such as Yanquinosaurus, and in 1988 Paul synonymized the two genera. However, a 2007 review of British dinosaurs by Darren Naish and David Martel defending keeping the two genera taxonomically separate. Metriacanthosaurus was a planned attraction for Jurassic Park, but only had 71% of its genome, complete before Dennis Nedry turned off the power and inadvertently caused the Isla Nublar incident in 1993. InGen successfully recreated Metriacanthosaurus for Masrani Global Corporation's Jurassic World. These Metriacanthosaurus on the website had some form of proto-feathers on their arms and up and down their spine. Upon being released from captivity after the Isla Nublar incident of 2015, Metriacanthosaurus would hunt small herbivores in the dense forests. But by 2018, it went under cruelty and then fall back into extinction by unknown cause. It remains unknown whether any Metriacanthosaurus DNA were collected by the mercenaries before the eruption. Dreadnoughtus is the first living titanosaur encountered in any of the films, as well as the first Cretaceous sauropod in any of the films. With the exception of the Mosasaurus, it is the second largest animal in the franchise, second only to Titanosaurus. The discovery of Dreadnoughtus provides insight into the size and anatomy of giant titanosaurian sauropods, especially of the limbs and the shoulder and hip girdles. The majority of its bones are very well preserved. There is minimal deformation, especially in the limb bones. Fine features, such as locations of muscle attachment, are frequently clearly visible. Dreadnoughtus also has an unusually long neck for its body size, making up almost half of the animal's length. The tail had distinctive features, including a keel on the first vertebra and extensive air sac cavities in the neural spines of the first third of the tail. Its neural spines had ridges connecting them to the articulation points, and the mid-tail vertebrae featured a triangular process extending toward the preceding vertebra. Like modern crocodilians, it had Y-shaped chevrons beneath the vertebrae with an expanded bottom stem for muscle attachment. Its shoulder girdle displayed a unique oblique ridge across the scapular blade. Additionally, the radius had a concave embayment on its top end and an unusually square-shaped bottom end. Dreadnoughtus were cloned sometime before 2022 by Biosyn and resided in the Biosyn Sanctuary located in the Dolomites Mountains, Italy. Upon arrival at the sanctuary, Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ramsey Cole pass by a Dreadnoughtus bathing in a lake. When the burning giant locusts escaped and set the forest ablaze, at least 4 Dreadnoughtus are seen escaping the forest fire by getting evacuated to the emergency containment zone in the Biosyn facility alongside many other dinosaurs, and when landing to retrieve the reunited group. It is possibly assumed for the Dreadnoughtus to be out in the wild, and it can be assumed it still resides in the abandoned sanctuary, which has been repurposed as an international preserve to this day. The holotype specimen was likely not fully grown when it died. The histology of the holotype humerus, which shows a lack of an external fundamental system and abundant fast-deposited or still-growing woven tissue in the primary fibrolamellar bone of the outer bone cortex, led Lacovora to determine that the specimen was still growing when it died. Dreadnoughtus was a massive titanosaur that lived during the late Cretaceous period, around 77 million years ago, in what is now Argentina. It inhabited a lush floodplain ecosystem with abundant rivers, forests, and diverse plant life. which it likely fed on as a giant herbivore. Estimates suggest Dreadnoughtus weighed around 49 metric tons, making it one of the heaviest land animals ever known. Its respiratory system, like other sauropods, included air sacs that extended into its vertebrae, reducing weight and improving oxygen exchange. With its long neck, Dreadnoughtus could reach high vegetation, and its massive limbs supported its enormous size, allowing it to roam its environment without natural predators as an adult. Dryosaurus is one of the 15 Mesozoic species genetically engineered for Jurassic Park. A total of 33 individuals were created under genetic revision version 2.9, making them some of the oldest dinosaurs in the park in terms of stability and minimal need for genetic modification. These dinosaurs were described as dark green with mottled brown spots and were housed in the Hypsilophodon highlands enclosure alongside Nanosaurus. They were first mentioned in the chapter The Park and made several small appearances throughout the novel. Their most notable scene involved John Hammond, Jerry Harding, and park workers treating an injured individual before returning it to its paddock, unaware that John Arnold had supposedly restored the systems. Dryosaurus was among the species capable of breeding unnoticed by the park staff, with an additional infant detected on the computer screens before the engine incident. During the events of the story, all 14 known animals were killed, and the remaining population was later eradicated by the Costa Rican government. Though not named explicitly, Dryosaurus first appeared in the novel as part of a herd seen grazing on a marshy plain by the river, described as medium-sized dark green, lizard-like or gazelle-like creatures that occasionally raise their heads above the grass. Later, as Sarah Harding navigated the jungle, she encountered a panicked herd of these animals fleeing from a velociraptor attack, their cries resembling those of yelping dogs. In the chaos, one knocked Sarah down before she escaped by climbing a tree, while another was killed by the raptors. Interestingly, Hypsilophodon also appears in the novel, with distinct descriptions that differentiate it from Dryosaurus. Dryosaurus subsisted primarily on low-growing vegetation in ancient floodplains. A quick and agile runner with strong legs, Dryosaurus used its stiff tail as a counterbalance. It probably relied on its speed as a main defense against carnivorous dinosaurs. A Dryosaurus hatchling found at Dinosaur National Monument in Utah confirmed that Dryosaurus followed similar patterns of craniofacial development to other vertebrates. The eyes were proportionally large while young, and the muzzle proportionally short. As the animal grew, its eyes became proportionally smaller and its snout proportionally longer. In the Jurassic Park franchise, Chasmosaurus is a medium-sized ceratopsid dinosaur known for its elongated frill and relatively short horns. Each is quite realistic. In real life, it lived during the late Cretaceous in what is now North America, specifically in the region that was once the eastern coast of Laramidia. The two main species, Chasmosaurus belli and Chasmosaurus russelli, differed primarily in frill and horn shape, with russelli having slightly longer, backward-curving brow horns. The frill, which had large triangular openings, was likely used for display rather than defense, as it was too fragile to provide significant protection. Some scientists suggest that the frill could have played a role in thermoregulation or been brightly colored for attracting mates. Skin impressions from Chasmosaurus fossils reveal a pattern of large hexagonal or pentagonal scales arranged in rosettes among smaller scales. While the coloration remains unknown, these features suggest a tough, textured hide. Fossil evidence also indicates that it had a relatively long snout, possibly allowing it to be more selective in its diet compared to other ceratopsians like Centrosaurus, which shared its habitat. Juvenile Chasmosaurus had proportionally smaller and narrower frills, suggesting that the frill developed as the animal matured. A well-preserved juvenile specimen found in Alberta supports the idea that it may have engaged in parental care similar to what is hypothesized for Triceratops. Despite its distinct appearance, Chasmosaurus isn't really seen in Jurassic Park movies, but they are present in video games and toys. It is sometimes referenced in franchise lore, but has not had role in the films or main storylines. In terms of behavior, it is typically depicted as a docile herbivore, moving in herds and feeding on low-lying vegetation. Its beak could have been its primary defense mechanism, as its horns were relatively small. Some older interpretations speculated that males had longer brow horns than females, but this idea has since been challenged due to the lack of clear sexual dimorphism in the fossil record.